Welcome back, pod people. In today's episode, I have Andrew Leman and Sean Branney, the director and writer, respectively, of the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society's film adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's classic short story, The Call of Cthulhu. Now, this is a really interesting and really good movie, and one that has quite a few differences from the ones that I've interviewed people about making so far. Namely, it is a black and white silent film, that it's a short film and it's an adaptation of a pre-existing story rather than being a completely original script. And so I'm really interested in hearing both of your perspectives on how making a silent film differs from making, a modern color sound film, talkie, if you will, and how adapting an existing story into a screenplay, how that works. So Sean, you are the writer who adapted the short story. Can you tell us a bit about what that was like?
Sure. When we started on the project, we had a couple of different goals. One of the things we were hoping to accomplish is we had really felt there were a number of adaptations of Lovecraft stories that were already extant. And most of the ones that are well known really took great liberties with Mr. Lovecraft's work. And
talking about things like Herbert West Reanimator.
Sure, which really, it shares the title and a little bit more than that. But really, filmmakers were kind of running roughshod over poor old Lovecraft, and making something new where perhaps Lovecraft's work was the germ or genesis behind the idea, but it wasn't really a telling of the stories that Lovecraft wrote. And we wanted to make something that really was recognizable as the Lovecraft story, was there through and through with it. The other thing that we thought would be an interesting approach, Call of Cthulhu is one of the most celebrated and emblematic Lovecraft stories that there is. And so in trying to think about how to bring this big, sprawling, epic tale to our, the limited resources that we had, we had thought about, well, what would it be like if this story, which had been written in 1926, had been filmed in 1926? What if, instead of being an obscure writer for the pulp magazines, Lovecraft was in with early Hollywood, and people were looking at his material as a source for a motion picture. Do you want to talk a little bit about the aesthetic inspiration, Andrew?
Sure. We here at the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society have always been interested in Lovecraft's own life and times, the 1920s and 30s. We were certainly been inspired by some of those classic old black and white horror movies like Nosferatu and Dracula and King Kong and great classics like that.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of use of sort of Dutch angles and deep, dark shadows that reminded me of German expressionist films like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Yeah, especially in the dream sequence parts.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
We worked with a very talented cinematographer named Davey Robertson, who, he learned how to shoot black and white film. And he can work miracles with a single light bulb. He can really create some pretty startling compositions. And especially for the dream sequences, we were definitely specifically trying to evoke that sort of German expressionist and also Eastern European stop motion animated puppet films from the late 19-teens and early 1920s.
I was going to ask about that. Yeah,
there was a specific movie we saw up at the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival in Providence, Rhode Island, called The Old Man and the Goblins. It's made by Mark Caballero and Seamus Walsh, and it was made 15, 20 years ago now, I guess. But they did it in the style of a early black and white German stop motion puppet film. And seeing that movie up in Portland really was one of the things that gave us the idea that it might really serve Lovecraft's material well to shoot this movie as if it had been shot in 1926 using the techniques and the style that they would have used then. So that was part of the inspiration for the whole project. And yeah, it went on from there.
Fantastic. So was the I noticed that the Cthulhu at the end of the film is stop motion. Was it a puppet or was it claymation, or how was that effect done?
He's a puppet. Sean's gonna point his camera at it. He's still
Oh my
standing there
goodness.
on our bookcase.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
wonderful.
He's a traditional stop motion puppet with a ball and socket steel armature. His head is made of foam latex with wires, and each of the tentacles is wired, and his eyes were little tiny Christmas tree light bulbs so that they could light up. And thank God we did it that way, because it turned out using his eyes, all the scenes he appears in are so dark that those 2 pinpoints of his eyes were what we used to track the motion of his head when we were doing the stop motion animation. If it hadn't been for those eyes, it would have been much, much harder to animate the head.
Good.
The hands the body is made of fabric, so it still looks today the same as it looked, except for a coat of dust. It looks the same as it looked the day we shot it. But all the parts that are latex, like his head and his wings and his fingers, they're made of latex, and that just deteriorates so quickly over time that those parts of the puppet, unfortunately, are crumbling to pieces. But the rest of him is still in pretty good shape.
Although rot looks pretty good on Cthulhu.
Yeah, a certain amount is flattering, but too much. Another few years here, and his wings will just be skeletons, I'm afraid.
Do you happen to know what materials the puppets of the 20s were made out of? I'm guessing latex wasn't as prominent at the time, but I'm not actually sure.
I think it depends on the puppet. I think King Kong was made from various kinds of rubber and rabbit fur and stuff like that. Those guys were inventing the medium, so I think they went on a puppet by puppet basis and made it out of whatever worked for what they were trying to do.
Yeah, I think the underlying metal armature everybody figured out pretty soon was a good idea, something that's both movable but will hold its position once it's set in order to do stop motion work.
I think the original King Kong puppet was at least partly rubber, but I don't think it wasn't like foam latex like we use now. It was probably painted layers, and it too has deteriorated over the years, and there's not too much left of those original puppets now.
Sadly, yes. So just a brief question. You mentioned your cinematographer being able to work magic on film. Was this shot on film or was it shot on digital?
No, it was shot digitally in standard definition. One reason why we've never issued a Blu-ray version of the movie is that the Blu-ray wouldn't look any better than the DVD, because the movie wasn't shot in high definition to begin with.
It was shot on a Canon XL1 on mini DV, which was a format, if you're old enough to remember.
I am.
Actual little tapes that we had to then transfer to, they all had to be captured as digital data so we could do the editing. But yeah, we have it all on actual tapes.
Tapes? Like
tapes.
Wow, not mini DVD or CDR or anything like that.
Nope.
Wow.
Tape.
Yeah, that was kind of heading towards the end of the shooting on tape era. And the mini DV tapes are quite small, and again, at their time, that was a terrific image. But that time was a long time ago. So
yeah, although I mean, I think that also contributes to the effect. Although, of course, the actual film of the old 1920s is sort of arbitrarily high resolution.
Well, yeah, Dave lit scenes for that great, lovely 1920s black and white contrast, but then we also applied a lot of effects in post-production, which we put them all together. We called it mythoscope, and it is Dave built every frame in the film is a multi-layer sandwich of contrast adjustment and a bit of glow and a bit of old-time film grain. So there's a lot of stuff added in post-production to make it look like old film, but it starts with the way Dave lit it and shot it in the first place. But then on top of that, there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on.
Yeah. So in terms of influences, you mentioned The Old Man and the Goblins, which is a modern film.
Yeah.
And we talked a bit about German Expressionism and the old monster movies. I also noticed that a lot of the framing of the interstitials and the introductory credits and such reminded me of the sort of Art Deco style that we see in, for instance, Fritz Lang's Metropolis, which came out the year before or the year after this was set.
Right.
And so I was wondering, and also some of the scenes that were shot on location in the woods reminded me less of films of that era and more of film serials of that era. Things like Zorro's Fighting Legion or The Adventures of Captain Marvel. And so I was wondering what films from that time period would you consider influences?
Well, you've named a lot.
I love silent films.
Metropolis for sure, and Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Nosferatu. There's a Fritz. I can't remember whether it's Fritz Lang or F.W. Murnau, but there's a film. I think it's called Daybreak. And there's a scene when the cops are going through the swamp to find the cultists in the middle section. We originally planned that whole thing as a virtually direct quote from the movie Daybreak, a tracking shot through the swamp that ends with the view between the trees of the cultists in the distance with the moon. And we did this whole super elaborate tracking shot on the soundstage at the time. It just, in the end, however, we didn't have proper dolly tracks. We were trying to do it with, a wheelchair on a cement floor, and the tracking was just much too shaky, and the payoff was not as grand and dramatic as we wanted it to be. So even though we planned this elaborate quote shot from that movie, in the end it was cut from the film, and the sequence through the swamp is cut together from other. Dave and Sean and I realized on the day this isn't playing the way we want it to play. So we shot a lot of extra coverage so we could cut together that sequence using other stuff.
I think an interesting, thing for contemporary filmmakers who are making things in a retro flair, the world has changed a lot in the last 100 years, and audiences have changed a lot. And we are very sophisticated consumers of visual media nowadays. And in the 20s, somebody might have seen a motion picture maybe once a week. And most of us nowadays are seeing, almost
5 hours of television a day,
daily. Exactly, the rate at which we consume and our ability to get it is pretty good these days compared to. So I guess what I'm saying is when a modern audience tends to watch a lot of that stuff from the teens, the 20s, the 30s, there is, I think, a very common sense of get on with it. I get it. We have understood
about pacing.
What the director is trying to communicate to an audience that perhaps wasn't as used to the language of cinema then as we are now. So, that's one of the things that happens in Call of Cthulhu. It's got the rhythm of the filmmaking is much faster than those older films. We set things up, but there's a certain snowball effect to how the whole story unfolds anyway and starts picking up more steam, and things just happen much faster than the rhythm tends to be in most of those authentic old pictures, which are just, they're made at a different time for a different audience.
That's one of the things that made me think of film serials in this. Is I could easily see this film being split up into 2 or 3 sections that each end in a cliffhanger before leading into the next one that you watch next week. And yeah, the pacing on those, which were 15, 25 minutes long, is much more rapid than the pacing on a feature-length film like Metropolis, which is 2.5 years long. Which, I mean, don't get me wrong, Metropolis is my favorite movie ever. But there definitely is like a good 45 minutes in the middle where it's
Yeah,
sort of reiterating the same themes over and over.
yeah.
Cool.
Well, do we have the show for you if you want old-timey cliffhangers? Because Andrew and I have also, in addition to our motion pictures, we've done a series of 1930s style radio dramas called Dark Adventure Radio Theater.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And we did one show that's 7 hours long, but it's broken into 20-minute chunks that each ends with a cliffhanger and then brings in a bit of vintage advertising between each one. And that was part of our strategy and thinking about it is going, how are we going to sustain people's interest across a very long time? And one way to do it in keeping with a retro aesthetic was to go, okay, well, let's kind of serialize it. Even if that won't be how people are consuming it, it's been broken into kind of digestible chunks as it goes. So.
Yeah. That's really cool. Are those the vintage advertisements? Are they actual or are they reproduction advertisements from that time period?
Some of them are based on real vintage products that are no longer made. Some of them are entirely fictional products that are inspired by really bad ideas for products that people.
Yeah, mostly we've found real products that existed in the 20s, and there's actually a lot of them we found in the back of weird advertisements in Weird Tales magazines. Yeah. Some of them we've renamed the name of the product, but things like radium infusers for your water, or radial toothpaste, all kinds of products were made.
Bio beans and electric trusses and there are all kinds of
things who used properly would accelerate your death. Lithiated sodas and all kinds of fun stuff that has gone by the wayside.
Fantastic. So you mentioned that you're not planning on releasing the Call of Cthulhu on Blu-ray because there wouldn't be a difference in visual quality. Are you planning on releasing it in any sort of streaming capacity, either through your own website or on somewhere like Tubi or YouTube or Amazon?
Yeah, we've had I was going to say love-hate relationships, but I think it's mostly hate. Relationships with distributors have been very frustrating for us over the years. So at the moment, we are distributor-free and kind of shopping around to try and find what's the best solution.
Okay.
Independent filmmakers are in a really lousy position relative to how the streaming business is set up. Streaming is good if you're Disney or Paramount or you are a major studio, and if you're just a dude with a film, that industry's not doing you any favors. So.
Yeah, it's not like we could choose to stream it and haven't chosen that. It's that there's just no way for us to get into that space at the moment.
I wouldn't agree with that because we could do it, but it's like someone else will go, well, we'll take all the money that comes in for 4 years and then declare bankruptcy, and then you will get nothing. So as indie guys, it's just very difficult to come up with a scenario that's not flagrantly stupid, or
that doesn't cannibalize the sales that we can make on disc. That
makes sense.
Yeah.
Have you looked into specifically Amazon Prime's video on demand service where you pay like $3 to rent it for 24 hours?
We have, and that is actually, I think, one of the better options out there. We do business, we sell through Amazon, and we do audio content through the Audible ecosystem, and for all the other challenges of Amazon in the modern world, they actually have been pretty good to deal with in this kind of capacity. So that, I think, is one of the more likely destinations for those films to stream.
Yeah, I know. I ask because I've recommended this movie to friends in the past who have gone, cool, where can I stream it? I'm like, well, you have to buy a DVD. And they're like, purchase physical media? What year is this?
That's keeping with our retro aesthetic. We have to go back to a digital disc technology from the early 2000s.
Yeah, no, the shorter answer is we are working on it and have been working on it for a long time and have not yet solved how to get it out there in a conveniently streamable format. But if we crack it, man, we'll do it.
Yeah. If you would like, I could try to put you in contact with Len Kapuscinski, the filmmaker I mentioned earlier, who is also extremely independent, doesn't work with any sort of mainstream production company, but does manage to get his films into distribution and is currently working on doing that for his most recent film, Pact of Vengeance.
Be happy to talk to him.
Cool. I'll send you all an email later.
Great. Thank you.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the film Daybreak earlier. Is that the 1918 film or the 1933 film under that title? Do you happen to know? The 1933 film is a Chinese film.
It's not that one.
Okay.
It's a German film. It's probably, I think it's either Lang or Murnau, I think.
Okay. I do want to watch that movie. I've never seen it before, and that's I'm always happy to discover new great silent films. I had another question, but I've managed to forget it. So what are your future plans for filmmaking? Do you have
Sorry, it's actually not Daybreak, it's Sunrise.
Sunrise.
Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans. It's F.W. Murnau, 1927.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
thank you.
That's the film from which we attempted shamelessly to steal a very nice tracking shot and failed.
Yeah, going forward, we made another feature a couple years after the Call of Cthulhu. We did Lovecraft story, The Whisper in Darkness, and it's a feature-length talkie. It's a story that was written in 1931, and so we kept with the aesthetic of filming it as if it had been filmed in 1931. And we've got, a few irons in the fire now. We were able to step up our production values between Call of Cthulhu and Whisper. Was just a bigger, more ambitious film. But we also started kind of butting our heads against the the limits of what one ought to self-produce, in terms of just kind of gambling one's own resources. So, the most of the stuff we've got cooking now is in a more traditional vein of, intended to be produced with other people's money, with distribution in place prior to production, kind of more traditional Hollywood low-end filmmaking. So until we get somebody to sign the dotted line and hand us a check on one of those projects, we bide our time like Great Cthulhu Under the Sea.
Indeed. Have you considered crowdfunding?
We have. I think it's unlikely that we could get the kind of money that we're after.
What
something in the $500,000 to $1 million range. I think we could probably pull through crowdfunding, but I don't think we'd be likely to go, a couple multiples beyond that. And most of the
that seems cool.
We'd like to do are again a little bigger and more ambitious than what our models suggest we'd be able to get through a crowdfunding thing.
And even if we succeeded in raising that much money, producing a film at that kind of budgetary level just requires, it's not just money. There's an army of people that go along with that. And
indeed,
I just think, I think it would be better for us and it would be better for the film if it were produced by a proper motion picture production company.
Yeah.
Every time we make a movie and we finish it, we say, well, let's never do it that way again. And I think that I can say that in advance for the crowdfunding model.
It's a preemptive strike.
Yeah. Very fair. I'm curious, what were the budgets of Whisper in Darkness and the Call of Cthulhu?
Call of Cthulhu, trying to remember now. I think came in for maybe a little over 50 grand.
Yeah, it's impossible to say really because we didn't have a budget. We just kept shooting stuff until it was done, and we spent what it took to get what we needed over the course of like a year and a half. And this was before, this was when HPLHS was still a hobby for me and Sean, and we ran it out of our Sean's garage and stuff like that. So it was never properly budgeted in the first place.
Our forensic accounting attempts, though, kind of put it in the ballpark of it. It was probably not much more than about $50,000.
Okay, yeah, that's about what I was guessing. Some $550.
And then Whisper,
I think Whisper was like
350,
350, 375.
Yeah, exactly. So it was less than 400, and it actually had a budget up front because we spent it all and had to get some more. So
because we hired an actual line producer to manage the budget. So
that was something we learned between Call of Cthulhu and Whisper. Get a line producer, but anyway, that gives you an idea of where.
Yeah, so low budget, but not quite micro budget.
And with Whisper, we were able to shoot on location in New England, and flew our crew and a dozen actors out there and stuff. So it was not a couple people in their apartment sort of kind of filmmaking.
I can see that the production quality, I have seen Whisperer. I can see that the production quality is definitely stepped up, and the fact that it's longer, of course, is going to make it more expensive.
And all that talking. Oh,
the ability to record a sound.
Yeah.
Oh yes, I meant to say my compliments to the musician who composed your soundtrack for the Call of Cthulhu. I think it.
Oh, that's a good story in its own right.
Oh, please.
Well, there's more than one of them. There was originally a fellow who was going to write all the music for the Call of Cthulhu, and he was with us on set all the time. He's actually in the movie. But I was increasingly disturbed because I hadn't heard any of the music, and I kept asking him, when can I hear some of the music? And he kept putting it off until one day, finally, I said, I got to hear something. And he blew up and stormed out. And this was less than a month before it was supposed to play at the Sundance or Slam Dance Film Festival.
Yeah, we had been accepted into festivals and stuff. We had deadlines, and while we had been partway through the shooting process, we got an email from, we're very fortunate that a lot of people at least know about what we're doing, and a lot of very talented people have offered to participate. And some guy was a composer out in North Dakota, and he was like, I'd love to be part of your thing. We're like, well, thanks, but no thanks. We got somebody else doing it. And then once our guy quit, it was like, where's that guy in North Dakota? Get him on the phone.
So that was Troy Sterling Neese, and we handed him the very daunting task of scoring this movie with, in a matter of a couple of weeks. And because it was really more than one person could handle, we also reached out to a couple of other composers who were here in Los Angeles, a guy named Ben Holbrook and a guy named Nick Pavkovic. And they each did. I had hummed out just the tune of the opening theme and gave it to each of them, and then each of them did his own orchestral version of the opening theme song. So Ben's ended up being the opening credits music, and Nick's ended up being the closing credits music. And then each of them also contributed a handful of other cues that are used throughout the film. So Ben and Nick contributed, and Troy did most of the rest of it. So between those three guys, we were able to get a complete score in time for Slam Dance.
That's fantastic. And it turned out very cohesive. So
yeah, they did a great job working with each other. And
surprising that we got away with it.
Yeah.
That's
I'm sure that was very scary.
One of the mottos of that film, really. It's surprising we got away with it. So.
Oh, fantastic. So earlier when you were talking about potential future plans, I didn't hear you mention the names of any specific other stories you wanted to adapt. Do you have specific ones in mind? Are you considering making an original piece? original in the sense of not being adapted from an existing story, or what's your plan? And have you not chosen yet?
Yes.
Yeah, no, we've picked.
I mean, no.
we have picked specific stories. They have different needs and different kind of budget tiers. So there's one story that's kind of a dreamy thing. We actually, I think, need quite a bit of money to do it right. We have another one that's a classic Lovecraft tale that we've broken out for a pretty detailed feature treatment on. We also have some stuff that we've developed for long form entertainment with television, as a thought underneath it. So we've got projects of just about every length. We have a lot of stuff we've developed that,
and some of it's gotten, heartbreakingly close to.
Oh yeah.
Getting approved by someone in a position to approve things like that, and then for one reason or another, as has happened to a zillion other people, the rug gets pulled out at the last minute, and that's the end of that story.
Yeah, that's showbiz for you. So
yeah.
Indeed, you are not the first guest I've had. First guests I've had on who have said similar things.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm curious. You attempted to reproduce the filmmaking techniques of the era in which the film is set, but obviously you also used certain things like a modern camera. So I'm curious if you could talk about what you think has made making this kind of film easier or maybe more difficult than it was back in the 20s.
Well, not having actually lived back in the 20s, I can't really say whether what we did was easier or harder.
I would say pretty confidently post-production is easier.
Oh yeah, post-production.
Much nowadays, because even what you can edit together on your phone is pretty remarkable compared to what it would have taken using 1920s technology. So
some of the scenes are composited together, and some of them are done in the camera. In the dream sequences in particular, we used a half silvered mirror and forced perspective tricks so that when the character of Wilcox is seen standing in front of Cthulhu's tomb, that's all done in the camera. The real actor is standing.
Oh, wow.
Is standing much further away, and his image is being captured in a half silvered mirror. So we're seeing through his reflection to the miniature set, and it looks like he's standing in front of it, but really it was all done live in the camera. But compositing, I mean, it was used in that time period. It was an optical process, not a digital one. So it's true that we use digital compositing instead of optical compositing, but the principle of compositing is still a perfectly vintage thing to do, which we did when there was no other way to do it. There's a shot where when Professor Angel is walking away from the Providence Art Club down the street, and we shot it on location in Providence at the Providence Art Club, but we couldn't afford to, block the streets and have real vintage cars and stuff going by. And there are buildings there now that weren't there then. So we had to use mats and miniature cars and various other things to composite together this whole shot of him walking down the street. And we used, static photos of vintage lampposts and things in the foreground. So yeah, there was a whole lot of trickery going on to capture what we think that street might have looked like back in 1926. And then we used forced perspective miniatures we built relay at 3 different sizes, a super miniature one that the sailors see in the distance, and then a large miniature one for the stop motion animation, and then a full size one that real actors could climb around on. So, and we blended the large miniature with the full size one using compositing in several shots of the sailors walking around in relay.
Cool. Yeah, I hadn't consciously realized that at the time, but as you pointed out, the 3 different ones, I was able to picture the shots that I'm sure they were each used in. So that's really cool.
And the fact that it's in black and white is another thing where it's like we got away with murder because it was in black and white. If you had seen these sets and miniatures in color, they looked ridiculous.
Yeah,
But in black and white, they look pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. You only have to sort of match hue in order to get things to match.
All about tone instead of color. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen the making of documentary that's on the DVD disc, but it does have some amusing anecdotes shared by the cast of some of the kooky stuff, and getting a chance to see what like some of the costumes looked like in color, which was quite a different experience from seeing it in the black and white.
Yeah. I haven't, but I'll watch that after this interview. So talking again about the future, what do you think is coming up in terms of technological developments or anything else that you think is going to affect the future of independent filmmaking? It sounds like you're interested in becoming less independent. You said you wanted to try to work with an established production company on whatever you make next, which sounds like you're perhaps frustrated with the difficulties of doing these things completely independently. I'm curious where you see both the future of filmmaking like this in general and the future of the specific things you're planning on doing, how you see that changing.
Well, I think the general, the trend for quite some time now has been, that things are getting smaller and cheaper and easier to do. Like Sean said earlier, you can now shoot a feature film on your phone in a way that, certainly wasn't possible even 5 or 10 years ago, and now is. Now the cutting edge special effects things like, the volume where you can do post-production in advance, basically, and put real actors into a, cycloramic computer generated environment and get all that stuff in the camera so that even the actors are interacting with, the Star Wars universe on set in a way they never have before. Lovecraftian stories.
Are you talking about the thing with the large curved screen?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Lovecraftian stories, a lot of them take place in fantastical locations, involve huge monsters or other dimensions or, islands rising up from the sea, things that are, you can't just shoot with a couple of actors in a room. You need a lot of extra stuff, and that stuff it's still out of reach of independent people. But if the trend continues, presumably that kind of special effects technology will only become more affordable and more accessible to people at the low end of the spectrum, like we are, is my guess.
Yeah. That makes sense. That's interesting that you mentioned about how Lovecraft's stories are frequently set in these fantastical locales, which is absolutely true for things like Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. But personally, when I think of the Lovecraft short stories that really stuck with me, they're either as you've said a few times now, like some people in an apartment, like cool air, or set almost entirely in naturalistic settings, and then at the end it gets kind of crazy, like the Call of Cthulhu or the Rats in the Walls, or they're set entirely in a naturalistic location and then only have like a few sort of supernatural elements in them, like the Shadow over Innsmouth.
Ooh, all right.
I thought you were going to say, the picture in the house, Shadow over Innsmouth requires a fleet.
Well, here's one of the things that
swimming in the ocean.
From a writing perspective, there are stories like, Andrew and I have spent a lot of time adapting Lovecraft stories into feature length projects. Because in the audio world, we've done, now a couple dozen of them. And that's, stories like Pickman's Model or the Rats in the Wall or Picture in the House, these small ones, they're not feature films. They are not They are small events written for pulp magazines. They are not long. There is no character development. There is no feature film story being told in them. And so that was kind of get back to the beginning of the conversation. If you want to make a feature film out of, some of these stories, they really require, bringing some characters to them and putting some people in them, and they require endings, which Lovecraft was not big on endings. He tended to stop. So, there are a number of adaptation challenges that I think a lot of Lovecraft works demand in order to make something feature worthy. And I think, in terms of adaptation or in terms of, that issue of naturalistic, well, yeah, The Shadow over Innsmouth is naturalistic, but it's a world that doesn't exist anymore. It's something that has to be I guess if you're going to do it as a modern day, maybe there's some, slummy seaside town you could use. But if you want to try and capture that, 20s and 30s world, which at least for us has been a big part of the aesthetic, it really does. You're talking about building something new and synthetic, and a lot of it's pretty demanding, to try and, even if you were going to try and create it in the Call of Cthulhu style, you'd need to build a miniature of Innsmouth. You'd need to, again, you got a lot of stuff that's happening in the ocean, and, swimming monsters, and, there are thousands of monsters in that story moving. That's not one shot alone is like,
there's the whole sequence of the old time raid when Obed Marsh was in prison, and the deep ones came to his rescue. You either have to, if you don't fully dramatize it, which requires an army of deep ones and an entire town, then you have to cut it, and that's a significant thing to cut from that story. So yeah, Shadow over Innsmouth is by no means an easy story to turn into a feature film, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. I didn't mean to suggest that it would be easy to adapt. I meant that, like, especially if one does update it to be set in the modern day, then it, like you said, film it in an actually existing crumbling seaside town, and there's an enormous amount of the production value already. And I could see something like make one really good deep one costume, and then present like a crowd of them with like shadows or silhouettes or something like that. So not that we get too deep into the weeds on that. But you mentioned, Sean, you mentioned how people need to sort of add characters if they want to adapt these short stories into feature-length films. And yeah, that was something that I typically ask people I'm interviewing, since I typically interview genre filmmakers in horror. One of the most important things in general, in my experience, is getting the audience to have strong feelings about the characters, either getting them to love the characters and want to see them be safe, or getting them to hate the characters and look forward to them being in danger. And in an adaptation like this, you don't really have the freedom to create the specificity of character like that you do in a wholly original script. And you and furthermore, you're adapting from an author who, as you said, famously is more focused on ideas than on characters. And so I'm curious how that affected your writing process, and how you managed to, because you did successfully manage to get me to, like, care about and be invested the whole time, the whole way through, despite me not having especially strong opinions about any of the specific characters. And I'm curious if you could talk a bit about how you accomplished that.
Well, Lovecraft was not personally particularly interested in human beings. He liked tone, he liked atmosphere, he liked architecture, but people and their emotions was just really not that interesting to him. And so he did not put a lot of time or effort in that really in any of his stories. but of course, when we see motion pictures or plays or things like that, where we go through something that's an experience in real time, the characters we watch are emotional ciphers for us that draw us more deeply into the story. And the stronger our psychological bond as an audience is with characters we watch, then generally the more emotionally rewarding the experience of a film or play is. So with the Call of Cthulhu, we really didn't want to monkey. We didn't really want to bring any new elements into the story. So we're not going to give, Francis Wayland Thurston a dog or a wife or a trusty sidekick, or, we just didn't want that new kind of baggage. It was like, how can we really try and directly just tell this story the way it's written? And there we actually deliberately leaned into the obscurity of kind of not knowing who the protagonist is. In some ways, it doesn't even matter who the protagonist of Call of Cthulhu is. We called him the Man. He never has a name in the motion picture.
Yeah, I noticed.
Because he then, with this notion of trying to let him be every man, he could be us if our weird uncle left us a box full of weird stuff and we stumble into the secrets and we see all these revelations. So, and it's not so much about him and how he uniquely reacts to all these phenomenon. It's about how anyone could stumble into this, this vast mystery that's so much bigger than they are. And that's where the terror, he's a cipher for us. And so once he puts all the pieces together, his mind is kind of blown. And, I think the hope was that the audience would, feel the same way. It's like, wow, if this had happened, oh, that would have been a mind-blowing thing to happen to me or to anyone to whom these greater secrets were revealed. Okay. So there, we really deliberately stayed away from a whole lot of character. And Matt Foyer, who plays the Man, is a terrific actor, and he's I think good at he draws and holds our attention. But in that film, it's not a particularly going on an emotional journey with him. And then with the same actor, Matt also was in The Whisper in Darkness. And there we really did want to introduce Albert Wilmarth as a unique human being and has a backstory and a history. And he's been through certain life experiences. And, we're feeling what he's feeling as he goes on his journey. So.
And to continue a little bit with what Sean was saying, as far as the Call of Cthulhu goes, at the very end of the film, the Man hands off his story to the listener, the other character to whom, and we see in the closing frames of the film, the listener's mind gets blown as he starts reading the creepy document left behind. So it's like the Man has his experience and then hands it off to the next guy who also doesn't have a name, but who, he gets infected with the same brain virus that has driven the Man mad,
which was in turn handed to the Man. It's this ongoing chain of here's things you ought not know. Enjoy them.
Oh, you've gone mute, Thomas.
Very reminiscent of Lovecraft's style of sort of directly addressing the reader.
Yeah, and that was one of the other things we wanted a sense of going, all right, if this story is being told, to whom is it being told and why? And in watching the Call of Cthulhu, you don't actually quite put together to whom it's being told and what's going on until the end of the film, where the context is most complete.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. That was really interesting. Well, we've run through all of the questions that I had prepared. Thank you so much for talking with me for this time. For anyone listening who would like to see more or hear more of the works of the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society, their website is hplhs.org. And if you have anything else that you would like to mention or promote, or if you use social media and would like people to follow you on there, please.
We have how many Facebook groups do we have now, Sean?
Too many. I don't know. We have at least a half dozen going there. And we have a large web presence. We have a website that's got lots of fun and interesting stuff related to Lovecraft and some of the weird stuff we do. We have a big store where we make and sell a whole variety of Lovecraft, entertainments for Lovecraft fans.
Not all of it in antique formats either. Some of it you can download.
That's right. Downloads in real time and everything. So,
Yeah.
but if you Google up Lovecraft Historical, you'll find us, and our presence is pretty conspicuous. And check out what we do. We have a podcast called Voluminous, which is Lovecraft. Some people don't realize that in addition to his stories, was the most voluminous letter writer in American history. And we do a podcast that dives into his letters and is an interesting way to get to know the guy behind these scary stories. And that's part of what we do too.
Yeah. Oh man, just brief aside on the subject of horror authors and letter writing. Have either of you been following along with Dracula Daily?
No.
Don't know it.
No? Oh, it's so it's an email mailing list, which I don't know how long it's been since you've read the original Dracula, but it's in the form of a series of letters between the different characters, and the letters have dates on them. And so what it is it's a mailing list such that every day it emails you the letters that are dated for that day. And so it's a sort of in real time and I think it's a fascinating way of experiencing a fictional story that I hope other people pick up that idea and run with it, because I'm really enjoying it.
That is a fun idea.
It is interesting. Yeah.
Can you if I subscribe to it today, would I pick up in the middle of the story, or would I start from the beginning and then go from there?
I am confident that they would start sending you the middle of the story emails. Right. I'm not certain what would happen with the ones that predate that. I'm not involved with this in any way.
It's an interesting idea.
Okay, well, once again, thank you so much for participating in this interview, and I look forward to seeing whatever you create next. You produce so many things that it's difficult to keep up with, and I wish you luck with getting some sort of contract with a production company and proper distribution, so that more people can appreciate these excellent films that you've made.
Well, thanks, and we'll look forward to talking to that friend of yours and see if we can make any headway on our own.
Indeed, yeah. I will put you in contact with Len after in just a few minutes.
Okay.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you again.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.